As
Didn't want to interrupt you.
no
Sorry.
problem.
I say it all.
As always, we will start with introductions.
Edie Takata, City of Roanoke Park.
Wait, Scott, City of Patati.
Adam Garcia, Sonoma County Transportation Authority, Regional Climate Protection Authority.
Chris Barney, SCTA, RCPA.
Alejandro Perez, Town of Windsor.
Mario Landeros representing Sebastopol.
Neither Bell, Sonoma County SPI.
Ken Eichstadt, City of Petaluma.
Karina Wilson, City of Santa Rosa.
Derek Montani, City of Cloverdale.
Shauna Gauze, SCTA, RCPA.
Larry Zimmer, City of Healdsburg. Dana
Dana Trey, SCTA, RCPA.
and Drew pulling the levers.
Drew Nichols, SCTA, RCPA.
Excellent. I'm not seeing public on Zoom. So I'm assuming we have no public comment.
Correct. Yeah, no members of the public are online.
So item 3, approval of meeting minutes from October 26th. Does anyone have any objection or comments from prior meeting minutes? Seeing none, I will assume that is passing unanimously. Onward, SB 743 update. Chris will be giving us an update.
Yeah, so this will be relatively brief today. We're wrapping up our agreement with Caltrans to kick off our VMT mitigation banking and exchange project. So we're working on the RFP materials right now, so I can provide just a really brief look at the schedule. So we're planning on releasing an RFP in January, mid to early January, with proposals due in the middle of February. We hope to get a consultant on board by March 12th or 13th. So we'd like to take it to our board, a contract to our board by March 12th. So we'll see how many proposals we get and how fast we can get through the process and try and make that happen. And then kick the project off in early April. So work would proceed on putting together some draft recommendations through November. So we'd hope to have the consultant be able to present draft recommendations to this group and the planners and our board then. Then we'd kick off a pilot and project concept testing period through May 2025. Bring some final recommendations back by August of 2025 and look to take some final recommendations to our board by September of 25. So it's kind of a rough look at the schedule. So we hope to have something in place to look at next, late next year. I'll bring, updates to this group, but we'll be looking for a project TAC as well. So if you're interested in participating on that, I'll have an item on January or February agenda to try and get volunteers to participate in that group. And then it'd be great to have at least 1 or 2 members from this group and also the planning advisory committee be able to review proposals as well. So if you're interested, reach out to me and that'll be happening at the end of February next year.
So when you bring that back, you'll have a little more detail on what a volunteer is signing up for.
Right, yeah. So in our detailed proposal, we were looking at probably 5 or 6 different meetings over, a year to 16-month period, just to provide feedback on proposed mitigations, how they could be applied, interacting with the development community and things like that. So reviewing documents and attending, 5 or 6 meetings.
Okay.
So that's kind of what we're looking at right now. Once we get a consultant on board, we can tighten that up and have a better idea of what they have in mind as well.
A TAC crossover episode.
Yeah, planners and engineers.
Adam doing his presentation under this item also
No, that's actually,
at the end. Okay.
Any questions for Chris? Seeing none. Thank you. Number 5, Measure M and Go Sonoma invoicing obligation status.
Yeah, that's just the standing item that comes to you every month. And it shows the active obligations and programming. So if you have funding programmed in this fiscal year and you haven't yet invoiced it, or you haven't yet appropriated it, then that will show up on this list, as well as if you have an open appropriation and you haven't invoiced. So there are a number of things that are verging on red, that is more than 6 months for invoicing. So please check it out and submit appropriately.
Okay, you want to run into 5.2,
The Go Sonoma Strategic Implementation Plan. So let me pull that up real quick. Drew, can you get that up? Thank you so much. And then, do you want me to run the clicker?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. So this is a presentation of the draft Go Sonoma Strategic Implementation Plan. You guys are all familiar because we brought you all of the chapters independently, and now we're bringing it to you as a whole. We are also intending to take this to the board, but I'd like to start off by acknowledging and thanking the staff that have worked on this document. There have been a lot, and we couldn't have, it would not have come together without them. So David Ripperda, who provided direction, support, and editing, as well as development of chapters 3 and 5. Brenton Hare, who created the whole cash flow model for us on the new measure. Ross Clendenin, who put together the project information sheets more than once. And Adam Garcia, who has the maps to help give a uniform look and size for the public's use. And to Drew Nichols, who makes each of our documents not only ADA accessible, but actually usable. So thank you all. There we go. So to give it a little bit of background, the Go Sonoma Act was passed by the voters as Measure DD on November 5th, 2020. And it's an extension of the existing quarter-cent sales tax known as Measure M. Everybody is familiar with that. Go Sonoma was approved by 71%, well above the 2/3 threshold needed to pass. Go Sonoma will pick up just as Measure M sunsets in 2025. And the ordinance establishing the act also requires that a strategic implementation plan be prepared by December of 2023. So what's different about Go Sonoma from Measure M? In the apportionment programs, where Measure M had 20% for road maintenance and rehabilitation, Go Sonoma has 38%, with no increase in the existing maintenance and effort requirements. Where Measure M had 10% for transit operations, Go Sonoma has 23%. The competitive programs make up the remainder of the Go Sonoma, with 27% for moving traffic and improving safety, and 12% for building bikeways and pathways. In Measure M, only 4% of the measure was singled out for bike and ped improvements. And in Measure M, local streets projects required a 1-to-1 match, and the bicycle and pedestrian projects didn't require a match at all. So in Go Sonoma, all competitive projects require a 15% minimum match of local funding. So also new to the Go Sonoma measure is the proposal for a capacity building program that will use 5% of the combined move traffic and improve safety and build bikeways and pathways programs to provide support to project sponsors to aid in things like preparing grant applications and technical studies and public engagement. The program is meant to evolve to fit the needs of the funding program applications as the grants become available. So it will necessarily need to start off small, but as the measure matures, how those funds will get used will become better defined. In addition, in the Build Bikeways and Pathways program, there is funding set aside for Vision Zero, Safe Routes to Schools, and other efforts totaling 1%. And in the apportionment program for transit, there is also a new programs meant to enhance transit operators assistance programs such as First Last Mile, commuter and transportation demand management programs, and that's 3%. The uses of this funding will be further defined through a preparation of a TDM master plan next fiscal year. And the measure also identifies 2%. Sorry. Struggling to see my notes here. 2% of each operator's apportionment may be used to supplement or instigate free fare programs. And those funds are available on a reimbursement basis to the operators. So the layout of the plan generally follows the layout of the Measure M strategic plan. One is an executive summary. Chapter 2 is the background. Chapter 3 is the strategic approach and programming. Chapter 4 is policies and procedures. Chapter 5 is the financial plan and cash flow model. And chapter 6 is the project information sheets, and then follow the appendices. So with a little bit more detail, chapter 1 is the executive summary, and it provides an overview of the plan format and the purpose. Chapter 2 is the summary of where we've been with Measure M and where we're going with Go Sonoma. Chapter 3 starts to get into the meat of the plan with the general financial approach, revenue forecasting, which also contains historical data for comparison, and the initial programming for the competitive programs that were included in the first cycle of the SCTA funding program. Chapter 3 includes specific information about the apportionment programs, including the formulas used to derive the shares and percentages for each program. And chapter 3 also shows the programming of the first project selected to be funded from the competitive programs. The first, move traffic and improve safety, which is 27% of the measure. And it should be noted that for both this program and the next competitive program, the number of projects being proposed in the early years of Go Sonoma will be available or will be able to be advanced through the use of interfund loan with Go Sonoma. The second competitive program of projects is the Build Bikeways and Pathways, which is 12%. And then chapter 4 contains the policies and procedures, which you will all remember having reviewed. Some of these things are covered in the, some of the things that are covered in the chapter include how and when the apportionment programs are distributed and the requirements for implementing the competitive program projects, as well as reporting and maintenance of effort requirements. Chapter 4 also describes how the interfund loans can be approved between Measure M and Go Sonoma to allow advancing projects. Chapter 5 is currently a bit of a placeholder. Since no funds have been collected yet, there are no actual funds to show, but it has been populated with the estimates from chapter 3 for the life of the measure, and this chapter will grow after the collection of the new measure begins. Chapter 6 contains all the information sheets for the projects that have been selected to be funded with Go Sonoma so far. This chapter will also grow as we have more calls for projects and select new projects to receive funding. The pages are meant to be dynamic and hopefully will be updated online, likely on a quarterly basis. But the sheets that are contained in the plan are a one-stop shop of information, but they are static until the plan gets updated. That's why we'd like to make sure that we do quarterly updates and have something that's really current online. The requirement is to update the plan no less than every 5 years, but for Measure M, we've managed to do it about every couple of years, give or take a year here and there. And the appendices contain the resources and references for all the users, both SCTA and the project sponsors. This is the place to find the voter pamphlet ballot measure, which I use all the time because I always go back to what the voters actually approved. And it's really handy to have that in the appendix. It's also the place to find the cooperative agreement amendments, or not amendments, sorry, templates, and the reporting letter templates. And because Go Sonoma is competitive, the evaluation criteria have also been placed in the appendices for reference and use in applying for the new funding in the next cycle. So that completes my overview. As I mentioned, SCTA staff is giving this presentation to the Technical Advisory Committee today, and we're giving it to the board on Monday. We are seeking feedback and direction, both from the TAC and from the board, on the overall layout of the document and the approach of the plan. Staff will incorporate changes and present the document in a more polished version to the committees in January and February, and then to the board in March. So I'm happy to take any direction or answer any questions. Not seeing any questions. Oh, there we go.
Lynch Creek Trail, I had consolidated the verbiage, but I haven't worked on the map. So I don't know, I guess that would be a change that comes after it goes to. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we can't change it. It's already gone to the board in this format, so. We're happy to take direction, and if you want to update it before we update the final, that's fine.
Yeah, and on Lynch Creek, I think we're trying to maybe look at collapsing it into one project.
Yeah.
Prior to the 7 phases, but just for purposes, one project to one contract.
Yeah, we've, done the site survey and carried on the design, and the design is far enough along that, there's we can put some of these items together. Before working without that information, it was a little bit speculative, but we have better information now. So
That sounds good.
Great. That's it, Mr. Chair.
All right, no other questions? Thank you. I'll review it. I'm sorry, was there a deadline on what?
There was not a deadline, but probably by the first week of January would be great.
Excellent. All right, with that, onward to the regional information update, 6.1 inactive obligation, just information only. Any comments? Petaluma, Sonoma, and County of Sonoma. And then 6.2 MTC Community Action Resource and Empowerment Care Program call for projects. And is that you, Adam?
That would be me.
That would be you.
Yeah. Adam will give an update on the model after this, but yeah, just wanted to give a brief update on the grant program. This is a regional program being administered through MTC. It's the Community Action Resource and Empowerment Program. And if you're familiar with the Lifeline Transportation Program, this is an evolution of that. And it's really focused on implementing projects that are identified by low income or disadvantaged communities. We've actually prepared a number of community-based transportation plans over the years. We have one that was drafted for the Roseland area in Santa Rosa, one for the Russian River area in the unincorporated county, one in the Springs area of Sonoma Valley, and one in southern and central Healdsburg. So the process of these different planning exercises was basically to go out to these communities and work with them to identify transportation improvements that they'd like to see in their communities. And so this funding program is really focused on funding those types of projects and also providing resources to help get those project ideas that may be a little more nebulous, more competitive for other funding programs and closer to actually being implemented. So the deadlines on this have been kind of shifting as MPC is developing the program. So they were initially looking at releasing a call for projects in November. That schedule is actually slid. So right now they're looking at doing a call for projects in December 15th, next week, with a due date of March 18th through 22nd. So the schedule is a little also nebulous right now. MTC is going to be actually holding some information sessions in January, February, and March. They'll be talking more about the program, eligible projects, how to apply. And they've been really willing to work with us and different project sponsors to determine, what's a good project, if this meets the criteria and how to apply. There's gonna be $21.5 million available for this program, and they're looking at having $1 million minimum for each county. So that's kind of our target for Sonoma County. So especially if you have a community-based transportation plan that's been developed in your jurisdiction, or you have some other, set of projects that have gone through another type of community-based process to identify priority projects, those would all be good candidates for this program. And MPC provided kind of a laundry list of different types of ideas, including bus stop improvements, accessibility to transit, improving bus shelters, benches, lighting, sidewalk improvements, rehab and safety improvements, complete streets projects, bike lanes, streetscape improvements, safety improvements, crosswalk improvements, and basically any other enhancement to improve transportation for residents of low-income communities or people with disabilities. So, I think there's a pretty wide range of different types of projects that they've identified. A lot of those are, already have been identified in some of these plans. As part of our last CTP, we also did a county-wide outreach effort where we talked to disadvantaged communities across the county to identify types of improvements that folks would like to see in different parts of the county. So there may be a nexus there as well. If you have one of these types of projects that you'd like to look into either implementing or getting some funding to help develop further. So that's where things are at right now. I included a link to the equity priority community map as part of the staff report. So anything located in those areas would, be good to target. But I think, if you can make the case, if there's a good project that would serve disadvantaged communities or disabled folks outside of those areas, I think a case could be made to go after funding for those types of projects as well. So more to come. Hopefully the call actually does come out next week on December 15th. So there's a little bit of time if the proposals are due in March. So I can just remind the group at our next TAC meeting as well, and send out reminders for the information sessions as they get scheduled as well. But some potential opportunities to get some projects built, or at least get them further along so they can compete for some other funding. So just wanted to make sure everyone's aware of that. We've provided this information to the transit providers, and I'll be taking it to the planners as well. So they'll all be in the loop on this. So yeah, more to come. There's a pretty, they've actually done quite a bit of work developing some guidelines that I've also linked in the staff report as well. So if you're interested, I'd encourage you to take a look at that document. And I'm available to answer any questions you may have too. So please give me a call or shoot me an email if you want to talk about projects. But
this is all going to be the standard Caltrans local assistance federal fund process.
some of it will be, but they've actually carved out $1.5 million of local funds that won't have those strings attached. So if you have a smaller project that's really focused on outreach to these communities, that might be, you know, an eligible source to tap into those funds. One thing that we're planning on submitting from SCTA is to try and get some of that money to help encourage people to participate in public meetings, you know, provide stipends or food, you know, childcare, things like that at meetings. And also to provide some training on working with community-based organizations as well for SCTA, RCPA staff, but we could open that to local staff as well. So that's what we're thinking of tapping into that. But, you know, that may be a source if you know, don't want to go through that regular process. There'll be a little bit associated with that.
Anyone have questions for Chris?
Just,
Shoot.
I was just, the total was 21.5 for the region.
Yeah.
And so you said to the county, it's already kind of broken down to?
It hasn't been,
No,
they haven't, you know, they're looking for at least a minimum of 1 million
to each.
to each county. And then it's competitive, right? With
Mhm.
that $1 million floor.
Okay.
And then the 1.5 is a regional
a separate,
program.
So that'll probably be
That'll be
pretty
on the top.
competitive, yeah.
okay.
Do you think that you'll apply a group of projects from us, or are we gonna be going after it separately?
We'll need to talk to MTC on what they prefer. So let's talk a little bit more about that. I'll talk to MTC about the best way to go, but they may want individual project sponsor submissions. I'll find out more and let you know on that. Based on how the discussions have gone, I'm thinking that's probably the way they'll want to go, but we're certainly, if we don't do a combined application, we're certainly willing to help out as much as we can as you put together applications and everything like that.
Yeah, we'll definitely want to be in it, Santa Rosa, so I think we're open to either option.
Okay.
And then I had attended a workshop back when the letter of interest was open, and I had asked because Roseland SCTA had done the CVTP.
Yeah.
But we've done our active transportation plan and the Roseland specific plan since then.
Yeah.
And I asked if projects in our more recent plans we could submit, and I got a really wishy-washy answer.
Yeah.
Did you get any more information on that?
They've added a lot to the more recent guidelines, but
Okay.
really adding some flexibility in there. So if
Okay.
you have a similar type of planning process that has worked with local communities on identifying projects,
Okay.
I think those will definitely be eligible.
Great.
Yeah.
We have a question online. I'm sorry, I can't quite read the name from here, but it's basketball.
Yeah, hi. I looked online on the meeting package of this meeting, and it only contains a draft of Go Sonoma. It doesn't have a agenda or other documents.
Ross and I are working on it. I know Ross was looking
I-
into it.
I believe the link was disconnected earlier this afternoon, just briefly because we had an update. So apologies if that's not available right now, but it should be momentarily.
Yeah, I just tried to access it, so I wasn't able to.
Go
So
ahead.
it seems not to have been corrected, but
We're working on that.
Yeah,
Gina.
thanks.
I will send you a link directly right now, or the packet itself, right now.
okay, thanks, Ross.
One of those things where it's correct on my computer here, but on my colleague's computer it's showing up as something else, so we're working on it.
All right, any other questions?
With your indulgence, Mr. Chair,
Please.
before we move on, I would like to go back to 5.2 briefly. In that in speaking with SMART, when we were taking some of their comments on chapter 3. It became clear that we needed to bring up again that SMART is not directly eligible for Go Sonoma funds. And so should any of the jurisdictions want to apply for, say, the MUP funding as in the next call for projects is one of your priorities, then you would need to partner with SMART. And in discussions here at SCTA, we have worked out that we will probably be able to contract directly with SMART for that, but SMART is not directly eligible, so it must have an eligible project sponsor as a partner on those projects. So should Windsor decide that MUP is one of their highest priorities, then you would need to partner with SMART on the application. That's all. I just wanted to make sure that that was clear to everybody, because SMART wanted me to make sure that that was clear to everybody.
All right. Onward to item number 7, the Sonoma County Travel Demand Model, and now we're on to Adam.
Yes, thank you, Chair. All right, so Adam Garcia, data analyst with SCTA RCPA, here today to give you an update and walk through some of the next steps of our travel demand model that's for Sonoma County. So we'll be talking, just understanding the current status of the model, some near-term improvements, long-term updates, getting a better sense of why we use the model, and then look at next steps. So understanding the current status of the transportation model, we'll be looking at the model description, what type of model it is, the scenarios we run through, and then the technical implementation. So very simply, the model is a way to be able to estimate traffic flows and support planning and policy decision making. There are two main data inputs, the land and the transportation networks. So we have a number of different land use planning areas and categories. And then the transportation network, which is comprised primarily of roads and highways and class 1 bikeways. In terms of the model description, just going a little bit more in depth of the land use categories, we see housing, retail, commercial, industrial, and then social institutions on here as the different land use categories that go into this. And we look at number of units, square feet, acres, students, to be able to then estimate those additional persons or loads into into those areas. The network facility types, we can look at either our bus routes for transit network and rail routes and the road network. So the simple way to think about the model description is that we have a few different scenarios that we're trying to understand and plan for, but we also have to understand where we are right now. So in terms of existing conditions, we have a base year of 2019 with those various land use categories and the transportation model. And what we want to be able to ask and understand is, into the future, how is the vision for the region under Plan Bay Area, as well as individual jurisdictions, general plans, how will that affect traffic flows? Movement of people. So developing those model scenarios is the first step. It's important to validate the models with real world traffic counts. So that's a step to be able to look into certain pinch points within our transportation network, be able to make those traffic counts and then validate it with what we're showing in the model. And so from that process, then we get a variety of different performance metrics. And I think these are the critical points that as the jurisdictions, the users of this data are really helpful in being able to weigh the decisions of different projects and policies and plans. So in terms of the nuts and bolts, we use something called Cube modeling software. And this is available for additional information if you want, and input. We have user guides, model update reports, kind of the life of what's gone into the Cube model over the past decade to really show how it's been a responsive model to what the demands are for the region, being able to, for instance, understand the visitor impacts, for instance, or AM PM differences, really trying to think about what are the needs of the county and how can we adapt the model. So in terms of the forecasting process, it's the four-step model. So you're looking at really where trips for individual persons are generated, but it doesn't necessarily understand how those trips are interrelated. So there would be the trip generation. So that's understanding about where those trips are destined to, the distribution, which would be the route they would take, The mode choice, thinking about, a variety of different ways to be able to get there, car or transit or alternative mode. And then finally, the trip assignment and route choice that actually links then that makes that decision of where the trip would go. So in terms of the near-term improvements, what we're really looking at is updating our land use primarily. So adapting to the next regional plan, making sure that that's consistent with Plan Bay Area 2050. Understanding if there have been any recent general plan updates, how those could be reflected and updated within the plan. Making sure that we have the most recent traffic flows and making sure that those are validated with the model. MTC has their own travel model guidelines that ours must be consistent with. And additionally, considering how the COVID-19 pandemic has influenced different travel patterns from work from home and public transit. So a few questions just to pose if you have any thoughts, how have development patterns changed significantly to alter travel patterns requiring updating the base year to 2023? Are jurisdictions interested in utilizing a model scenario that matches Plan Bay Area 2050? And is there a simple update that could occur without a costly traffic study? So just a few questions. I'm not sure if anyone has any thoughts on any of those. We can keep moving on to.
Does anyone have any input for Adam here?
Just got to point in, when you say real world traffic count, so this is all this big data. So you've gotten all this data that's gone into the model.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily from big data. That would maybe be more related to the travel behavior study, which uses phone data and things of that sort. The traffic validation is actually going to an overpass or intersection, actually trying to count the traffic and then going back to the model and then saying, what does the model predict based off the inputs that we have in terms of the people living there, people working there, and where we would assume those flows to be. And so that validation process, would then kind of take place once we see where, at this intersection, the count is. In the real world, what does our model show and how accurate is that within what, degree of error?
Okay.
And so if you were to do that, is there some kind of correlation where you can input that into the model and it corrects, or you just have to mess with the model to try to get it to match?
It's messing with the model. Yeah. So in the past, we've generally used traffic counts that you've already collected or your consultants have. And, there's a little bit of whack-a-mole, you need to you'll have traffic counts across the county. You use Caltrans counts as well. And so you have to dial in land use assumptions and different constants and things in the model to try and get it to match as closely as possible. There is a process where you can use a hammer to make the model match exactly the traffic count. So we've done a little bit of that in the past. And the one benefit to that is you get a model that is doing really good at matching current counts. The problem with that is you've applied all these really heavy-handed factors to the travel model that may not do the best at reflecting future travel patterns. So the model's not doing a good job of representing current travel patterns. So you're adding all these adjustments.
Yeah.
So it kind of throws things off when you're looking at the forecast. So we prefer not to do that, doing the adjustments and moving things around is kind of the preferred approach, but there is a way to kind of. Once you get to the end, we usually do a little bit of that to get it to match a little bit, but if you're doing that, if the model's doing an awful job and you just correct everything using that process, your model's basically useless when you're looking out into the future. So when we get to this point in the future, we've generally done a call for traffic counts in the past. So the more we have, the better information we have to try and kind of dial in the model. But it's a land use thing as well. So we work closely with the planners to make sure that, where people live and, where job sites are, all that's correct as well. It's a combination of getting those mathematical factors and that land use inputs, and also stuff like the average speeds and, the capacities of roadways. So some of you may have done this in the past. We, every 5 or so years, we'll request that you take a quick look at the model network, and make sure that the observed volumes are in the ballpark, that the number of lanes are roughly correct, things like that. So there's a lot that goes in there to try and replicate what's actually going on. There's a lot of art to the science, and we usually work with consultants as like a independent third party to try and take a look at what's going on and kind of true things up. So yeah, it's a process. But and as you take a look at the model output, or your consultants too as well, we always ask, if you see something weird, let us know so we can look into it. We do a countywide validation effort to try and find the weird things that are going on. But when people are looking at specific projects or problems, that's when a lot of weird stuff will kind of, rise to the surface that we haven't seen as part of that countywide effort. So please let us know if you see anything weird. If it looks strange, there's probably something going on. And a lot of times it's something relatively simple we can fix. So something we always say to consultants that are using the model, or if you're looking at the model data, that feedback loop is really important to kind of dialing things in and making the results useful, because it's a tool, right? So it should be applied correctly, and interpreting those results is really important too, right? Taking that information that's coming out and deciding what it's telling you is another process. So.
Please.
I have a question. It's directly related to answering this question. Yes, there have been development patterns. I was going to ask, in the last few years, state housing authorities have made dramatic changes in housing law, allowing for increased densities and streamlining the process, even going so far as ignoring land use codes by states if there's not a valid housing element. And I think the county did not have a housing element for like a couple months or something, and a whole bunch of developers jumped in and have much higher densities. Is this a tool to address what those impacts would be?
Yeah, that's exactly what this tool would be used for. That process also is what we just kind of completed, of being able to understand all the different development projects across the county, essentially. Knowing though there's, those builder remedy projects, that starts to move into the future land use evaluation and modeling. So we'll take that, some of these projects, we're not sure if they're going to go in or not. That stays kind of in what we know is for sure will stay in the current land use. We've received direction from the jurisdictions that for a lot of those builder remedy projects that they stay off the current and be considered for those, kind of future build out scenarios. That if that's, what's potentially happening, then that's part of the data we need to be able to kind of put together this bigger picture. But once those projects get further towards entitlement, that's a great example of what this model would be used for, is to say, if you are going to build a big project where there's not, a lot of transportation resources, what would be the impacts on that transportation network, and that the consultant would likely, come up with mitigations, and so forth. So that's an example of how the model would be used as well.
Yes.
I agree with that, especially because Santa Rosa is adding so much housing and we have the general plan effort. But then on top of that, I support the base year being 2023 because before I was at Santa Rosa, I was with consulting firms in transportation, and it seems like none of the consultants wanted to update base years because no one wanted to be the first one to do a post-COVID base year.
Yeah.
But like we're 3 years away.
Yeah.
And so like, when are we gonna get with the program, right? Because things are different and they've somewhat gone back to the way they were. Like, I feel like this is now what we're gonna be for quite a while. And so it seems a little counterintuitive to use like 2019 baseline numbers when we're making so much change now. And we like our planning processes have had to adapt and get with it. So I feel like our transportation ones should too. And then the second question I can't see, but I think if there's benefit in us matching Plan Bay area, that could be interesting, but at the same time, so when I interact with Plan Bay area in a lot of ways, it's so regional and they can't focus in on local issues that it's not as helpful. So I think in some cases where we have projects that are bigger, that are in their regional, transportation program, then it can be helpful, but they don't include anything that we're doing on a more local level, so.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, just to note also, one of the parts of our data sharing is that all of that land use, all the land use projects, development projects, that's something we're sharing directly with them. So they'll at least know what we know at that kind of detailed level that we've gone, with you guys through. So there'll be some of that knowledge. Just, how will that fit into the larger Plan Bay area program? Yes, bigger question.
And I'd also add that, a ways back, we actually created 2 different future scenarios, one consistent with Plan Bay area. That's a requirement when we're doing our comprehensive transportation plan analysis, that we have a future forecast that's consistent with the plan, the regional plan. But we also have developed a general plan build out scenario that's maybe closer to what each of the local communities is foreseeing, right? Like it's matching those development numbers in the general plans, right? And what the EIRs for the general plans were based on. So when a lot of the local work, the project level work is happening, generally the analysis for those projects is using that general plan forecast instead of the regional Plan Bay area forecast. So there are a few different options to kind of get at there. And I agree with 2023. I think one issue is just having data to back that up, right? Including validation, having recent traffic counts. But I'd agree, things are kind of settling down. We're seeing, Adam had up there a few big things that have happened, like the work from home rates. So that's kind of flattening out now. For Sonoma County, we're at about 15% of workers are working from home right now, which is huge because before the pandemic, it was like 4 or 5. So that's a big increase. Across the region, it's about 19, I think. So I think that's kind of settling down and we can plug that in to, it's had an impact. Traffic is during the peaks is a little less intense, I think, because of that. And then the transit impacts, I think, are still kind of sticking around. So, we don't know exactly what to do about that, but we can work with the transit providers to kind of, where's that going to land, right? Like, I think that's still a little bit in flux. I think work from home is pretty close to where it's probably going to be, but yeah, it's a crystal ball to some extent, right? We're trying to predict the future.
When you add in work from home trips or work from home percentage, you're accounting for people who are not driving to and from work, but then is there a way to account for other trips that people make? Like on the days I work from home, I drive to the gym in the morning.
Yep.
So I'm still driving.
Yeah, we're gonna actually get to that in some of the updates. It's a spot on question for sure. Zeno, did you want to go? You have a question?
Yeah, I had a question about uncertainties in the model. On some of the things you said, touched on that already. So there is the uncertainty in prediction, but there's also the uncertainty in the sampling of traffic counts vis-a-vis how the model depicts the current situation. And I wonder whether these uncertainties are included in the information that the model gives. And then a kind of a follow-up question would be, the way you do the traffic counts, do you know how to do that to reduce the uncertainty in how the model depicts the current situation?
Want me to take a shot at that? Okay, thanks for the question, Zeno. And I think everyone here knows that there's a lot of uncertainty in traffic counts, right? So we try and get for any validation data, we try and get as much and as long a period as we can to try and get something that's probably pretty accurate. But in our model validation reports, we have tables in there that talk about how close we're getting to different targets. A lot of times when we're looking at traffic counts, we don't try and hit that exactly because we recognize there's a delta to that traffic count number, right? So we're just trying to get close. And then we look at a lot of other things across the county, not just traffic or cars at a certain section. We look at average trip lengths, right? Like how many trips per day people are taking, VMT. So information from travel surveys, that people have reported. So we look at a lot of different statistics and try and get as close as we can to all of these different metrics to make sure that we're relatively accurately representing how people travel in the county. And I encourage you, if you're interested in that type of information, to take a look at the last model validation report and model update reports. They get into that in some detail on how that's done and what the validation rates are. So, but yeah, it's a big problem. We're trying to represent the real world with math and more simplified, right? So can be tricky for sure. And I think always recognizing that there's error in the model results. And I think that interpretation is really important, that when, a traffic engineer or planner or whoever's looking at the data, I think that interpretation and, that's really important, interpreting the results and making sure it's represented correctly. And, if anything looks strange, being able to explain that is really important as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Right, great. So now looking next section of long-term updates. So we talked about kind of the 4-step model. It was somewhat limited, and our long-term updates are looking to do an activity-based model, kind of along those lines of linking trips and being able to reflect more of what the real-world activity is like. As you were mentioning, Tarina, the activities of linking trips, you go to work and then you go to the gym after. The 4-step model would just see those as separate individual trips as they're kind of being counted. But the activity model is trying to recognize that you can do trip stacking, having multiple destinations within a single trip. And so it's a way to be able to more accurately reflect the movement of people around an area. So here's a helpful diagram that kind of shows the difference. So the top one is the trip-based. So very simplistic and just thinking home from work is one trip, work to lunch is another trip. Whereas in reality, those trips are linked together, coming back to one another and all interrelated, so it gives us a better idea of that actual movement across the landscape. So a few of the advantages of going to an activity-based travel model are being able to think about the non-automobile travel patterns, including transit and biking and walking. As I mentioned, thinking about late trips, considering how many trips are shared, you have multiple people in the car. This all leads to then more detailed analysis with more accurate VMT estimation. And then is able to be more consistent with MTC and other travel models as well too. That's really where the kind of industry is going, so we're keeping up.
Adam or Chris, do you know which of the Bay Area counties have activity-based models right now?
We're the last holdout with the 4-7.
Keep it up. Thanks.
Yeah, Contra Costa and Alameda are nearing the end of their development of their model. So once they're done, I think will be it. But it's been pretty rocky for some of these counties. I know Napa and Solano had a lot of issues with their conversion. So you're switching from a pretty simple model, which is what we have now. We can run it in like 20 or 30 minutes, you know, get in there, look under the hood, see what's going on. These models are basically, instead of you looking at groups of cars, like Adam said, you're basically simulating every single person's activity throughout the day, every day. So we'll probably look, you know, going from 20 to 30 minutes for a model run to like 20 hours or like 24 hours. So it's a big complex thing. And with all that complexity, there are a lot of places things can go wrong. So, which they did in Napa and Solano. MPC's had some issues with theirs too. So we've kind of like waited for them to kind of work out a lot of the kinks. So I think we'll be in a relatively good spot when we shift. Our colleagues down in Marin County have done a lot of development on their model, and Fair and Peers, which are our modeling consultants, feel like their model could easily be adapted to Sonoma County. You know, there are a few other things we need to consider that they don't really care about, like Mendocino and Lake counties, right? Like that's a big deal if you're looking at Cloverdale or Healdsburg or some parts of the county. That's a pretty big impact on travel. So that's something we'll need to take a look at. And then we've been working on visitors. So that's another thing that we want to keep getting better at. Like, what are all these people visiting Sonoma County? What are they doing, right? Like, they show up in the traffic counts, but they don't behave like a normal person that lives in the county. They'll travel slightly differently. So that's something that we've been trying to get better at. So yeah, hopefully that answered. Yeah.
Okay, so moving on, what is the model used for? Both by SCTA and the local jurisdictions. So a big one for us, SCTA, RCPA is using it for the comprehensive transportation plan performance analysis. So being able to understand the different projects that are going into the CTP, how will they perform, how would they ideally improve traffic flows, reduce unwanted impacts. And for local jurisdictions, the various area plans, for general plans, specific plans, and critical for environmental review, as I mentioned earlier, just being able to evaluate a project's impacts on VMT and the local roadway. That goes true for housing elements, project level I mentioned, and then just being able to project both current and then future travel patterns and those metrics that they talked about before, including VMT and others. So again, a few questions. maybe we can just take them one by one, just, what are your jurisdictional priorities for travel analysis? What are things coming up where you might see this model being useful for? Pause if anyone has thoughts, otherwise I'll just move on. What is your wish list for a travel demand model? So if you're ruminating on some ideas, what do you say, oh, I wish I could really be able to analyze this thing and not do that or not? There's a lot of online tools that are trying to fill this need, maybe with not the same degree of specificity that our travel model can do, but still get within the ballpark. So maybe if you're using some of those as quicker analysis than going through the SCTM process, that'd be great to know. So yeah, any thoughts on these questions? Priorities for travel analysis, kind of your wish list for a travel demand model, or any other tools that you might be using?
Yeah, go ahead, Craig.
One, funding, traffic mitigation fees. So for Catadia, there's development happening in other jurisdictions. It's having a big impact in our jurisdiction. So,
Sister cities.
right, and a lot of those arrangements are in the works or being made. So that's just verification of those proportions.
Anyone else?
Joanne, I see your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just, and I've said this to Chris, it would be great to have more finer grain detail in the northern part of the county because it doesn't show up on the regional travel models very well. Just so as we start talking more about rail benefits and improving transit connections in the north, I think having a little more giant census tracts or whatever the traffic analysis zones don't really help that conversation very much. So I'll keep thinking about what it would look like, but just more fine grained detail.
Great, thank you. Zeno?
Yeah, I wonder whether there's any thing in the model that predicts like EV adoption, climate goals. Are we on track with respect to the county climate plan, that kind of projection and adjustment of what we need to do to get there?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's nothing on about tracking electric vehicles. Those will still count as individual cars. On the climate change side, though, we definitely use VMT to help inform on the RCPA side the transportation emissions. So there's a direct correlation from that. I imagine what we could start to look at is understanding the share of electric vehicle cars and how maybe that share might then reduce the emissions. That could be a potential thing to look at. Probably defer to Chris for that, but just what's off the top of my head, I'd be interested in other ideas too.
Yeah, we have been here in Sebastopol monitoring the DMV data that come up every year, and that give like total EV adoption in the county and by zip code. And there's a very interesting but probably understandable pattern that in the more wealthy zip code, the EV adoption is way better than in the less wealthy zip code. Yeah.
Great, that's really helpful to know. Thank you. All right, if there are no other questions, we can go to next steps. Heading to the activity-based models. So one of the things that we're bringing to you in January is a follow-up on this and reviewing our model administrative guidelines, which is lightly technical, more heavily philosophical about why we use the tool and the importance of it and its effectiveness, the process that we go through with the jurisdictions. So not the nuts and bolts of actually operating the Q model, but more of the philosophy of why we have the model. Then moving on into March or so, we'll be looking at the different scenario models and forecasts, so we can revisit the 2023, 2050 and general plan build out scenarios. And we'll have to see about the timing for the white paper that might get pushed back a little bit. But as Chris mentioned, Barrett Pierce is helping us with the transition to an activity-based travel model. So we're expecting to have a white paper on that to share by ideally summer, probably at the latest. So. And I think that concludes the presentation. Open to any other questions? Yeah.
No other questions? Thanks, Adam. Item 8, the upcoming December 11th board meeting. Do we have anything to share on that?
Yes, as I mentioned earlier, the strategic implementation plan will be going to the board, as well as the state and federal obligation history that you guys reviewed a couple of months ago. I think it was in October. We brought it to you guys and you all looked it over and gave us comments, and then so make sure it was accurate, and so that'll also go to the board. And then I believe there are a couple of other presentations that will be going, but not from the projects programming side. Is that right, Chris?
Can you repeat that?
Sorry, the presentations to the board. Adam, are you doing I'm trying to remember what else is on the agenda for the board.
So the bike share.
Yeah, that's right. I knew it was something.
Yeah, that's a big one.
And when would the bike share start? Spring?
We're looking at summer 2024.
Okay. All right, thank you. Item 9, roundtable discussion. Does anyone have anything they would like to share? We have some prompts here for grants being pursued, bid environment, other business. Oh, I'm hearing something over here.
I wanted to let the TAC know about the kickoff workshop for the SB1 guidelines development that's going to be happening. So that is scheduled for December 14th, which is next week, and from 1 to 3, and there's a link here. But if anybody's interested in participating in that development of the guidelines, then you can.
I don't remember seeing any email on that.
Oh, I'll be happy to send it out.
Doesn't mean I didn't get it. I don't remember seeing it.
Do you know if that's gonna be recorded?
Yeah, they're usually recorded and then posted as they go until the guidelines are adopted.
Usually takes a couple weeks for them to post the PowerPoint online, so they have to do the ADA remediation.
Anyone else have anything to share?
Yeah, we just opened bids on the $3.3 million River Drive Cypress grant funded project. And the bids came in about 17% under $600,000 less. Yeah, so something to be said, I suppose.
So
right?
Was your engineer's estimate anticipating really bad and that's why it's 17%, or?
I can't say. I mean, I don't know.
Cause that's what we, our bids have been coming in pretty close to what we wanted them to, but we're bumping them up because everything is coming in so high to try to get there, so.
I understand.
But they seem to be steadying.
Yeah. It was trying to be realistic, accounting for inflation.
Yeah.
It's still a happy result.
Yeah, we opened bid on like a $7 million project this week. And it came in, we don't have enough money for it, but it came in about where we expected to.
So we opened up a $4 million Maria Drive project, and we used in putting the engineer's estimate, we used all of the prior data that we had, particularly north of McDowell, and we had 2 bids that were almost very, very close, that were above the engineer's estimate and 2 below it. It's, it does seem like things maybe kind of stabilized.
But a pretty close window overall.
Overall, all 4 were very close, yeah.
That one loud resident on Maria will be really happy. Can't remember her name anymore, but she drove me crazy.
Okay, yeah. There's a few.
Yeah, we had the 4 bids and they're pretty close as well.
And we got a bid protest. Seems like every time we get a bid protest.
Anyone else?
Joanne Parker.
Joanne, what news do you have?
Well, I haven't brought in truckloads of money yet this week, but just to update, as everyone knows, we have awarded contracts and are moving ahead with the Petaluma North Station. We anticipate the permit will open up for the pathway between Rohnert Park and Santa Rosa in the spring. So we'll do another event associated with that. That's part of that Petaluma North Station contract. You'll see about 6 miles of pathway constructed with it. And then Windsor is mobilized. We awarded the contract in mid-November, and I don't think we had a SCTA TAC meeting since then. So I thought I'd bring it up that it's awarded, almost fully signed and ready to go. I think everyone's super excited about it. And now we turn our attention towards the remaining funding for the Healdsburg rail and pathway. We secured an FRA grant. Again, I don't think we had met in this group since we got that 28 million for Healdsburg systems work. But we have a balance of funds now. And just so everyone's aware, we anticipate seeking state funds for that balance from probably 4 different pots. So I don't know if everyone's planning to apply for active transportation program funds this year, but we will be for the pathway between Windsor and Healdsburg, as well as the rest of the rail from Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program, and then a few others in the year following. We're chasing that gap. You probably all saw the puzzle piece version of funding that project. We have 1 piece of the puzzle left, but that piece is now being broken up into four discrete pieces. So I just want to let everyone know we're very focused on that. And in addition, we have a couple elements associated, notably the Windsor extension. We're looking to secure funding in partnership with Windsor to be able to fully build out the pedestrian grade separation portion of the pathway there. So that's the other high priority. So that's us.
Thanks, Joanne.
I have a good grant one. We got $200,000 from MTC to buy bollards. So we're gonna be able to get about 1,500 of them. So our warehouse is getting creative about ordering for them. But it's actually a really interesting grant that's gonna come up again. So I would encourage you to apply to it, because I don't think we can get that funding a second time. But it's the MTC technical assistance. It came out like a month and a half ago or something. It was just a letter of interest, which I submitted. It took me like literally 15 minutes, and then they never released the real grant. I just got an email that we got accepted. And they gave half of what we asked for, And they had a follow-up question, which is how, so what we did was we said, you know, we have 12 miles of class 4 in adopted plans that we don't have any money for bollards for. They followed up and asked if any of them were on the active transportation network, the MTC one, and pretty much all of them were. So that was pretty much why they accepted it. They also gave $200,000 to City of San Jose. But they're gonna be opening up that grant again in first half of next year. And it was a super easy process. It was their first time around, so maybe the second time there might be some more hoops to jump through, but it was a good one. And it's for technical assistance of all kinds. So I just happened to read the fine print and it said procurement. And I think no one else noticed that it said procurement. So it was just me and San Jose that asked for the money for it. So it's exciting.
Well, thanks for that. Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hey.
we got a TA grant too, but very different.
Yeah.
So yeah, I filled out the same thing, 15 minutes, I think, because Shauna said, hey, fill it out, it's due tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I ignored it for all that time until Thursday, it's due Friday. So I want to thank Chris, SCTA, for being open to us, to City of Roanoke Park piggybacking our 40,000, not 200 and not truckloads of money like Joanne's getting, but it's $40,000 for technical assistance for, I asked for help in community outreach or developing a community outreach plan or doing some kind of community outreach around the Roanoke Park bike ped overcrossing at Copeland Creek, because in anticipation of needing to bolster, need to really understand our community in anticipation for active transportation, and we needed help for that. So what Chris is open to do, because SCTA is doing a community-based transportation plan around our Central Roanoke Park PDA, same area, same communities that we'd all be talking to. So, you know, the timing is right. We just got to figure out the technical parts of the contracting and so forth. But yeah, it was one of the reasons I think I was hesitant is there's the letter of intent and 7 questions, and I couldn't tell really what I was applying for, to be honest.
Yeah,
They weren't
we
very
didn't either.
clear.
They
So
didn't tell you
was that
when to
your
spend the money.
experience?
They didn't tell you what the reporting
No.
requirements are. So I had to call with them and ask those questions. She's like, I don't know what's good for you.
Well, yeah, exactly.
This is off the top funding that they created for the ATP programs, technical assistance for the ATP program. So it's intended to be regional. They administer it. It's just carved off the top from them. So they will be just sending the money out, as far as I understand.
They also, so we had applied for 2 projects. One was bollards, one was actual technical assistance. And we did not get the technical assistance one, but I had a debrief and they said the only reason they didn't pick it was because it wasn't directly on the active transportation network. But I said, but this link right here is an alternative. So people wouldn't be on this really congested facility. We would make an improvement right here and they'd be next to it. And she said, oh, well, we didn't realize that. So you should apply again. So you can also apply for projects that are an alternative next to or really close to their active transportation network, and they'll accept those, it seems like. So super easy way to get some money. I know we're all competing, but like this is in the spirit of
We're all jealous.
safety and like you should apply for sure.
You'll pay
Yeah,
more
thank you
attention to
very
my
much for
emails,
that
won't you?
It all depends on when you send them.
Well, Ken, I think Petaluma got 40,000 from the same fund talk from the Lakeville corridor as well. I think it's on the same
We did
list.
actually, yeah, will help. Yeah, that's a big deal. And we're, that whole corridor needs a lot of love. So. Yeah, thank you for tonight.
I
I
have
don't feel
a
as bad.
slightly related question. So all these bollards, you're putting them on your class 4s.
Yeah.
And what is the spacing? There's been so much talk about, I'm taking bollards out in a few months.
Yeah, really?
Yeah.
What's
Do you want
spacing
ours?
then? I would love yours.
Can
Yeah, if you want
I
to
ask,
donate.
when you're talking bollards, are you talking about K71?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're talking about the ones that impede, access onto the class 1.
Yeah, at the connections with the roadway.
Yeah,
No, I'm
okay.
talking about class 4s.
So
like the
green
K71.
set K71 delineator.
Oh, okay.
the thick ones.
Yeah.
The ones that you put
I think
between.
the spacing's gonna be 20 feet.
Oh,
Usually
between
20,
the
but you can
street
do
and,
25.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, We only have like 100 bollards that we have a place for immediately, so we have to store about 1,400.
So
Hopefully they're
sell-
Maintenance
well,
center's fine.
Yeah, I'm
maintenance,
sure they're loving that.
when we need some, can you sell some to us?
We can like barter that,
Aside
like gum on the
Yeah.
plate.
Do you have a street sweeper that'll fit? Yeah,
That's a sore subject.
okay.
So, well, actually, that's a really good update. I should go with is that, street sweeping is the #1 reason that we cannot put class 4s in right now, because the standard ones can't fit. So we have been looking into different options, having wishy-washy conversations with Recology about what they were gonna do about it. We just had a call yesterday where they admitted that a lot of jurisdictions have been asking for it, and so they're willing to begin the conversation to start talking about
Raising the rates for the
raising the
users.
rates to get some money to buy a street sweeper. And so I think the more that other jurisdictions can continually bring this up, it would be super helpful, because like we were trying to press the fact that this is like a really immediate issue. And they seem amenable to it, but also they keep saying, oh, well, it's gonna take so many years to get the sweeper, and then that'll be after we figure out how much we can raise the rates. And so there's like,
They got a new general manager. We're talking with them very closely on it. I don't have all the details from City Hall on it, but and one of the ones in our little desktop research is that there's an electric one, Italian, that's out there. The work that I've done on the street sweeping for parking buffered bike lanes, I can, meeting with them on site, they can go through an 11-foot lane. They just pull up the outside sweepers, and they can sweep the gutter pan and stay within that 11-foot. And it worked really well. We tested it out, so they could do that if you're going to do parking buffered bike lanes. But the situation where you're trying to get down a 7 or 8 foot pathway there, I think Santa Rosa basically take a leaf blower, and you got the street sweeper out on the left side of the pylons, and the leaf blowers sending the leaves out there, and they're getting swept up. And that's what it is. So.
yeah, it's interesting because they won't sweep our armory facility, even though it is 11 feet. They said they won't fit, even though they told us in the beginning that they would fit.
No, it won't fit. I tested it out, and it's just, they have different crews. I think collectively, we all need to be talking to them. They need to keep hearing it, and maybe we can get some between us, talk, make sure we're all messaging the same thing. But we need to nudge them into this is the future. So
it's almost like we need like a regional memo and instructions of this is what you do and this is how you do it.
So 11-foot is their current minimum width for a sweeper to go through?
Yeah, we tested it out. They can do it. So.
Yeah, I thought it was less than that.
I thought it was less than that too.
They have to pull up the outside, sweepers. So those things are retractable. So they have 4.
Just automated inside.
Yeah, super easy. I mean, we tested it out. It was like drive down, everything's fine, and they're not close to parked cars. They still
Because
have-
I had something in my head saying that they could do a 10-foot, because we're putting in a class in the future, we're gonna be putting in a 10-foot class 4.
Next, parked cars.
Next to buffer, so they're in theory.
Well, they could do it, they just don't have the
One
turn
side and
signal.
curb on the other side.
Yeah,
But-
they could do it. They're just not gonna have the sweeping aspect of it. One quick other thing on the street sweeping.
The street sweeper's not actually gonna sweep, it's just gonna run through.
One other thing is that when you do all the slurry sealing, so we did, $4.5 million of slurry sealing, and then, really you shouldn't be taking steel bristles out there with that coating, and it's FHWA has got information out there. It should be the nylon. That process, those nylon bristles come apart, and then they're really problematic to get in the drainage way. They may have kind of gone through that, but we really shouldn't be using the steel bristles on a slurry seal or a cape seal type configuration, so. Or something else that I think about at 3 a.m.
So you can run your sweeper through without the sweepers on it, you'll be set.
There you go.
So I just wanted to bring up that, as part of MTC's active transportation plan and the technical assistance program, they have some budget to do workshops around the region. And they're planning them out for 2024. So I had a conversation with MTC about this, and I did bring up maintenance as an area of interest for, especially maintenance of class 4, but in general, maintenance of bicycle and pedestrian facilities. So keep a lookout for those being scheduled, probably in the spring to summer timeframe. We may work with them to host something here, or but that hasn't been determined yet.
Good, definitely a need.
I have a
Anything
question.
else?
I do have a couple, or just a question to, you brought up cape seals. I'm wondering, people, any experience with the rubberized cape seals?
We have, I have not directly,
Mhm.
but we have used them. I think Jeff Stutzman has got the most familiarity on our team. And you know, we did a test case out on South McDowell, and it kind of held up well. So I think, you know, where you can't go in and do the full, you know, grind and overlay or reconstruction, that you need to find those other, you know, other options. And I think that's one of them.
So I was just wondering if, has Hillsburg used it for anything?
You know, I've never done it myself.
Yes.
What I've been told is the product is great. Whether or not the additional cost is something you can swing, and the constructability is a little harder, but not a reason to not do it. But I've heard only good things about the product when it's done.
Well, we used it, and it's just that we had a really hard time with the contractor. We did in our last, but we're just, you know, I'm wondering, was this our issues we have with it? Is it workmanship or was it product? So you said Hillsburg.
Yeah, Hillsburg did it, Larry. Gosh, I was trying to put a timeline on it. I want to say around 2009. It was under the.
Can you tell me the streets? Do you think you remember?
Yeah, we I recall Grant Street from Hillsburg Avenue up pretty much all the way up to the university. That was a good long stretch.
Yeah. Okay.
Right, a little others. We have files on them, but the contractor at that time, gosh, I cannot remember. International something or other.
ISS.
They seem to be kind of on the cutting edge on that, very much on top of it. There was a fellow from one of the institutes who was all over it and very, very helpful on it. Rogers. He did quite a bit of workshops and seminars, but you know, the product did work. I think it exceeded expectations, because we were looking to get, you know, the big 4 years, and then we were putting it on courses basically.
Yeah,
it was a just total necessity with that use, and amazingly, because I think the rubber content really performed. And it survived for March Avenue is another one.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and it did survive for beyond those 5 years, well beyond that. Did pretty well. Some of the issues with it, though, I will tell you, depending on conditions, it could be a moisture issue, or once it went though, we had areas where it would just delaminate. I mean, it was like they roll up sheets of rubber. It wasn't a real chronic issue, but there were a couple little spots. Repairs needed to be taken care of, and I think that was probably what contributed it. But in terms of, like you said, you know, maybe you have problems or issues. ISS, whatever they were, they went away, and it seems like Valley Slurry kind of took over, and they really, I think, started changing the approach on that. And so that's why I've heard some issues that started rising with their approach on this stuff.
Okay. I'll talk to you a little bit more. After.
Yeah.
And you're gonna apply for the grant? There's usually some funding.
We
which
applied for it
kinda-
last time, so
it
we got
attempts
it.
To cover the distance,
It's-
the cost difference.
Yeah, we did all that and we used, it worked out fine. The grant, everything was good. It's just that, you know, the end product, and we're kind of left with a sour taste, but I want to use it again because I think it's a good product. It's just I think it was
Yeah,
some
I think-
issues.
For some reason, I think Clay worked on one, maybe in Santa Rosa. I don't remember. I'll follow up, and if he's got information, I'll give you a call.
Okay, thank
We
you.
wouldn't use it.
You
You
wouldn't
would
use
not
it?
use it again?
Do you remember
Same
your
problems?
contractor?
It was
yes.
Patrick. Yeah, Patrick Barnes.
That Barnes.
Yeah.
We can find him.
Huh? Matt Barnes?
Yeah, we can,
Okay.
yeah, he was the
He had
engineer
a lot of-
on it and,
Uh-huh.
yeah, it was, I think it was the Arrow project, we used on the Arrow project. Anyway, we had nothing but problems.
Moisture is the big issue.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Steve Urbanek has a lot of good information at the county. He's like Professor Urbanek on this stuff, so.
On rubberized, yeah.
Yeah, and then, but also just the vapor pressure, that whole aspect of it was causing it to delaminate. We found that in Petaluma. And it was very sparse. It wasn't a very large area, but it's just problematic if moisture underneath is getting up there, because it's impermeable. So, and Steve is really very knowledgeable on that. He's thought a lot about it.
We were thinking that was part of it too. I mean, I think we had several problems, but that was one of the ones that came up. We have very high water table too. And you can do something about that, but we had several things and, you know, there's a lot of pointing, and at the time, there was only one vendor and a sister vendor down south and only one plant, and it was just, so it may be that things are different now. But we would like to see everyone else use it with a vendor and this many years out, but right now we wouldn't consider that rubberized.
That water is a big issue.
You said you had two things?
I thought I did. No, I can't remember what the other thing was. Feel like, yeah. I think that was it for now.
Anyone else?
Yeah, a couple of things from me. This morning, the California Transportation Commission awarded 50 million to MTC for the State Route 37 Sears Point to Maryland Improvement Project out of the local transportation climate adaptation program. This is the local version of the Protect program that some of you may have applied for the federal call for projects for that, where it really is looking at resilience for facilities, evacuation routes, stuff like that. So there's gonna be another cycle, I believe, in the next year or two, so it'd be worth looking into that. For this grant, there's specifically going to be replacing the Tolley Creek Bridge just east of Highway 121 in Sears Point. The existing bridge is 2 lanes, 60 foot long. It's going to be a new 5-lane bridge and 400 feet long to improve flow through the bay, and also doing some habitat restoration in Solano County. Also, we're still waiting for results of our federal Safe Streets and Roads for All grant. Hopefully we'll hear back about that in the next week or two. They were doing some big announcements on the rail side this week with high-speed rail. So hopefully the highway side will have some press releases for us these next week or two. Once we find out about that grant, we're gonna be circling back around with our list of existing projects, and thanks to you all for submitting your updates to your projects and what new projects you have. We'll be coming back sometime in the spring to look at those and see what we can fund with our 20 million regional measure 3 funds that are eligible for the county, Santa Rosa, Petaluma, and Santa Rosa as the transit operators, and then the 9 million of Measure M funds that we need swapped with the STEP programming this fall. So stay tuned, we'll be in touch.
So that 9 million is going to be coming in to us as Measure M or Go Sonoma, not going through.
It'll be clean money.
Some of that. Anything else? Item 10.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays to everyone. Thank you.
Yeah.
Very briefly.
Yeah.
But we've never.